on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. It's been a few weeks, I think almost a month since my last random rambling, which was not intentional, but we are back once again, and I'm very happy to be joined today by none other than Sin of Sin's Corner, somebody who's been here on the channel before. Last year, when I was doing a bunch of Marvel movies, she
Mhm.
joined when we were talking about the Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Yep.
But I've always wanted to have Sin on for this series in particular, and when I was bringing it back, as I've mentioned in the last few months since I've been having new guests on, there was a short list of people I wanted to get around to, and Sin, you were on that short list. So
Aw.
very, very happy that you were able to make it on here today. And how you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for the invite. It's
Yeah,
great.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, no, I really enjoy your content. I enjoy like seeing the community you've personally built. You not only cover things on YouTube, but you also live stream to various platforms like Twitter and all these different things,
Yeah.
as well as you get to cover various movies. And I know, like myself, you also have early access to certain
Mhm.
films and studios and stuff like that. So it's always great to see somebody else kind of building their platform, have a specific style, and I always really appreciate that in particular is a specific style. I think in this current age of YouTube, in this current age of film discussion, there's so many people that just do a lot of the same. And I
Yeah.
think it's really about trying to do something different. And that's something I really appreciate about your content, that you don't really try to fit into a mold. The way you approach things, the way you speak about things, the ability to have a hot take and not really be bothered by it, like you just kind of go for it. So I really appreciate that about your content. And so, yeah, I'm happy to have you on. And I always love to start these off with a bit of an icebreaker, just something to kind of, rip the band-aid off. YouTube can be an awkward thing.
Yeah.
Getting in front of camera, getting on the mic, it's something that I think a lot of people in the modern day, while they do it, it is something that can still be awkward to a lot of people,
Yeah.
especially that for the first chunk of time. So
Mhm.
what was it that made you click create channel? What made you get in front of that camera? And can you remember some of those awkward moments in the early days of starting your channel?
Wow, it's been a while. So I first started posting this type of content in July of 2019, and the reason I did it is because I work in the field of audiobooks. I have always loved stories. I grew up without a TV, so things like reading and comics and things, that was my TV, that was my entertainment, creating a movie in my mind. And so I feel like I have the best day job ever working in the field of audiobooks. I absolutely love my job. However, some of the books I had to work on, not necessarily for narrating, because I really only narrated nonfiction mostly, but I started doing more behind the scenes work like audiobook proofing. And I still do that, but I'm a little bit more up in the company now. But I would have to work on a lot of books. I'd have to proof a lot of books that I was not crazy about. It's in a genre that is super popular and is really coming up. In fact, in I don't know when, but eventually there's going to be a TV show about one of our most popular books called Dungeon Crawler Carl. There it is right there. And it's a genre called lit RPG. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. Most
No, I
people
haven't.
haven't.
No, I haven't.
So think Ready Player One,
Okay.
something like that, where a lot of the story is connected to a game or a game-like environment.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
And most of the books that I worked on, I didn't feel emotionally invested in it. There were no high stakes. A lot of the story was in the game, and I didn't care what happened in the game because it's just a game.
Right.
I care about what's going on in the real world, like how does that transfer over to conflict in the real world. So I wanted to talk about stories that interested me. So I just started my YouTube channel to do, initially, was just doing trailer reactions because that's about all I had the time or interest in. I was inspired by Grace Randolph of all people because I saw she was doing trailer reactions. So I was like, well, I can do that too. So during my breaks at work, I take a break from working on an audiobook and I just started reacting to trailers and it felt extremely awkward. It's so cringe when I look at my very first videos, like, oh my gosh, I didn't know, like I sort of tried to emulate what I had seen people do. Um, and then eventually I started doing movie reviews. Maybe my first movie review was Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And I just kind of, that's really where my heart was, to talk about the actual movies, not necessarily just react. But my channel took off in 2020 when the world ended and everybody was going nuts.
Right.
And I was in a dark place like a lot of people were, so I started doing comedy reactions, and that's kind of what got my channel like, you know. And so I still would do some comedy reactions, but eventually I just tapered off to primarily focusing on what I absolutely just love with all my heart, is to talk about movies and stories. So that's how it ended up the way it is now. I did kind of, it was awkward, to talk to the camera. And it was like, this feels so weird. And I was afraid, like, because for the first while, my channel was secret. I didn't tell anybody in my family about it. Because it was like, this is my little thing. And I was so worried someone was going to walk in and see me talking to the wonder what the heck was I doing? Because it did feel odd. But, eventually, Anthony, there was this weird thing that happened. And maybe you've experienced it too. But eventually, that camera became my friends. I'm talking to you guys. Like, it's like you're right there and I'm just talking to you. And it feels legit like I'm just talking to a person, even though I'm not. But that makes it a lot easier. I just am sitting down with friends and I'm venting about something that I absolutely hated. The latest thing was Fubar season 2. Oh my gosh. Um, and that hurts really bad to say that because I love Arnold, but to just absolutely loving all over something like Better Man.
Right.
So yeah, I run
That's
the gamut. I don't like I'm gonna tell you what I think. If I think something's stupid, I'm gonna say it's stupid.
Well, that's great. I think that that's just like the fun of it. I think that's another thing too, going back to what we were saying before about a lot of people doing the same, is that there is this kind of thing to try to like fall into a specific outlook, something's popular or something like that. And that's not to say
Yeah,
that if something's popular, you can't also be like, hey, this was yeah,
right.
this totally, it warrants all that popularity or that success, but yeah, I do think it's an awkward experience at times. And similar to you, I know for me, my family and my now wife, like they knew I was starting a YouTube channel, and I knew that they were going to watch the videos and everything because they were in support of it. But my version of that awkward experience was, if you go back to the early part of my channel, for the first like maybe like year, I was always filming in my car. And the
Mm,
downside to that was that, if I was driving, because I would usually like record myself talking while I was driving, I wouldn't be like looking into the camera. I'd be just like driving and
just
just
yeah,
talking about the movie.
yeah.
And maybe I had like a red light or something, I'd look at the camera. But because of that, and I didn't really have like a microphone, I didn't like, the editing was super like schlocky. Everything about it was
Yeah, yeah.
messy. There was a charm to it, but there was also this thing where it's like you got the audio of the rumbling of the car or cars passing by, and like I just wasn't comfortable enough yet to be able to like just be talking on camera or into a microphone,
Yeah.
knowing that my family was right in the
Right
next
over
room over.
there.
Right, exactly, exactly. And then eventually I took the transition and I started filming, because at the time my now wife and I were living with my mom and my sister. And so I would go to the garage. And so then I would have to kind of limit my time because the garage had no AC. So I'd be in there
Oof, hot.
and I'm like trying to shoot this video. And
Yeah.
by the time, especially if you've made mistakes or you're fumbling your words, you're starting to get frustrated. I'm starting to sweat by the time I'm halfway through the video, and so um I that
Dry off in between takes.
right. Well, honestly, it's a huge reason, as somebody, who has a shaved head, it's a huge reason I wear hats a lot of the time, because at least can capture some of that,
Yeah.
and it makes things a lot easier, so I don't have to worry about like sweat on camera. But yeah, I can remember those days of just feeling so uncomfortable with the notion of people being around me. And then
Mhm.
eventually I kind of broke out of that, specifically when I started doing vlogs, whether it be at the theme parks that I would go to or like conventions. I would start to film myself
Mhm.
in these situations. And bye, my love. I love you. Sorry, my wife's leaving for work. But
Bye, wife.
Sin says bye, wife. But yeah, I would start to film myself in these situations, and it was a little bit uncomfortable at first, right? Like
Yeah.
there's
Yes.
that part of like my eye kind of wandering, and realizing that people are looking at me. And then eventually I kind of like broke out of that, and I just started to kind of be like, all right, let me just try to make the best video for, like you were
Mhm.
saying, the person on the other side of the camera, right? Like, because you are still speaking to people. I can even remember for a while I would always film myself where it was clear I was looking at myself all the time. on the camera, like the screen of the camera, instead
Mm-hmm.
of like looking at the camera. But I do think like that's part of something I actually really appreciate about you, right? Like you're not really preoccupied with looking into camera like a lot of times. Like you will, but a lot of times like you're looking at your screen, or you're using your voice more so than you are like trying to make like this overly like, hey everybody, welcome to my channel kind of
Yeah.
thing. And I think that's really cool, because I think that's part of the best part about YouTube is that ability to kind of pave your own path. And so
Yeah.
I look back at those days and I look at like what I've been able to do now, and it's really just about like figuring it out and becoming more comfortable with yourself, right?
Yep. Finding what works.
Right, exactly. And so, yeah, it's interesting to hear a little bit about what you were saying there about like the audiobooks, stuff like that. I didn't know about that. And so, one other question I love to kind of bring up at the top of these conversations, and I'm really curious on your take here, is that, you said you didn't grow up with a TV,
Mm-mm.
but I love knowing what that moment that kind of like created this love for fellow cinephiles is for when it comes down to film. When I've said it a million times, but for me, it was my parents showing me the movies of their childhood, right? Like, so my
Mm.
favorite thing of all time, anybody who knows me, is Star Wars. I'm literally wearing a Star Wars shirt right
Oh.
now. This movie in particular, The Phantom Menace, came out when I was 6 years old. It was the first movie I remember seeing in theaters. But before that, my mom, who's a huge Star Wars fan as well, like showed me the original trilogy a million times. It was so ingrained in me at that
Mm-hmm.
point. And similarly, my dad was like big into the Rocky films or the Rambo films, and like would want to show me like some of the cool action movies of the 80s. And my mom would want to show me like 16 Candles, and all those films from that time, and the Back to
Yep.
the Futures and all these different things. And so it was growing up on the stuff before my time that really kind of helped solidify my love for film. So I'm curious for you, as somebody who didn't grow up with a TV, do you remember that moment where you realize I love this medium more so than just like the casual person who likes movies?
So my first memory of anything as far as movies goes was when my parents, when I was real little, and they didn't necessarily have a babysitter, and if they were interested in a movie, they would just take me with them without even knowing what the heck the movie was. So I was exposed to things that were a little bit too much, probably for my young mind. And I was particularly scarred by Halloween, the movie Halloween that I watched at my mom's workplace. She was a caregiver for an old lady, and the old lady lived in a really creepy house with bats up in the attic, and Halloween was playing on TV one night, and instead of being, smart like my parents, instead of just changing the channel when they started to realize what kind of movie this was, they just told me to turn around. I could hear everything. And it scared me, and I still have nightmares about Michael Myers to this day. And the thing is, I don't think I have any one particular thing that made me realize I really love this. It was probably just the fact that because I grew up without a TV, whenever I was around anything that was like a TV show or a movie, I was just captivated by it, because all I had was really, like the read aloud books on tape, and the, just books that I would read, and comic books. So when I saw something actually being physically acted out instead of my brain having to create the picture, it was just, I was enraptured by it. And it affected me more than probably another child my age who had grown up with it and maybe got desensitized to stuff. I took it very seriously. Like, I thought it was for real.
Right. Yeah.
So I think it just all goes back to the whole idea of it just being story related, just another form of storytelling. And it's also much more, it's faster to watch a movie than read a book.
Right,
So
of
you
course.
get this whole story just in this little bite sized piece of time. And when it's done well, I just absolutely love it.
Yeah, it could be incredibly magical. And
Oh,
I feel the
yeah.
same way about movies, in the same way, even compared to TV shows. I have a lot of people that I work with who know what I do, and they're always like, "Oh, have you seen this show? Have you seen this show?" Because they're all on like the new show that's out. And I always tell them, for me, I kind of gave up on watching a lot of brand new shows because I've just been so burned by a new
Oh,
show
yeah.
coming out, watching it, it gets canceled, and you spend so
Yep.
much time watching this, and then you have an inconclusive story a lot of times, especially in the modern day of streaming with, things like um, Netflix, they're famous for that. I'll never
Hmm.
forget one of the times that really broke me was they did a series a good chunk of time ago now called Marco Polo that was so good, and they did 2 seasons, and the second season literally ended just as like all the main characters are about to head into war, like literally a shot of them about to head into war, and then the show got canceled. And it was a great show, but it was just like there's so many shows like that that have started and they get canceled, started and then it gets canceled.
Yep.
But I love watching movies because unless it's part of a franchise that more often than not is going to get that follow-up, a lot of times it's just you get a conclusive story, beginning, middle, and
Hmm.
end, and it either lives and dies. It's going to live and or die by that runtime. Whatever
Yes.
happens. And I think there's something so magical to that because you can also sit down and consume multiple stories in a day if you choose to. That can
Yep.
be so different. Really quickly, I did notice we had some comments.
Hey,
Wilkie's
Corey.
movies. Yeah, he pops in here saying "Hey all," and then going to the Michael Myers
Oh,
comment. That to this day he stalks
that's
you.
that's my son. I have a Halloween laser disc right over here.
I noticed.
Yeah, my son cosplays as Michael Myers, and I recently got him two new Michael Myers masks for his birthday because the one that he's been using for years is just crumbling, falling apart. And that little turd, he took those masks and he put them in my bedroom. And I was like, yeah, nope, moved them. I am not going to wake up to see that mask across there.
That's
Yeah,
great.
he likes to cosplay as Michael, and when he does not talk. He
You
will not
got to
talk.
fully commit. Yeah, you got to
He
fully
fully
commit.
commits. Yes, he does, and he's got all these videos on his channel of him just stalking convention goers, just standing there watching people and getting their reactions as they see this creepy ass Michael Myers,
That's
just
awesome.
staring at him.
That's so cool. I love going to conventions and seeing the Michael Myers that commits, right? Or
Oh
like
yeah.
you happen to like look at the very top of the staircase and there's just one standing there
And
as you're
it's just
coming
that
up.
white, oh, yeah. And
Yeah.
I get this, like, it really, Anthony, I'm not kidding. It really, he still scares me. And I'll see cosplayers and I'm just like, oh. And I know he's not real. And I know this guy is not going to hurt me. But it's just,
Right.
it goes all the way back to this, like that lizard brain child in me, from way
Right.
back then when I was petrified of him and I still am. It's
No,
so
I
ridiculous.
get it. For me, that version of that for me was and it's funny because I love horror. Anybody who watches my
Me
channel knows
too.
I love
Yep.
horror.
Yep.
And I've seen so many like demon possession films, but there's just something about Linda Blair in The
The
Exorcist,
Exorcist. Yeah.
that face of hers that's just so horrifying to me versus like any of the bajillion horror films that I've seen that have maybe you could argue in some ways like scarier makeup or more modern day creepy effects and stuff, but there's just something to that movie and that look of her that maybe just because I saw it so young it just makes me feel uncomfortable. Or like my biggest fear of all time, sharks, right? Like I take it to the next level where
Oof.
like things shark movies just freak me out.
Have you
Like I'm
seen
not
Dangerous Animals?
I haven't seen Dangerous Animals
Okay.
yet. It's on my list to catch up on, but I won't
Okay.
lie, my because of my fear of sharks, it's not one that my brain was like rushed to this one. But I have heard good things, so I want to see it just for the sake of seeing a good movie. But yeah, that's I totally get it for sure. Now, talking about books and stuff like that, and that being such a big part of like your consumption of media, for me, I've never really been a big book guy, and
Mm.
the only time I have been is because of my favorite franchise, Star Wars, where like I keep up with the books and the comics in that world. And that's not to say I haven't read other books and stuff like that, but it's definitely not. More often than not, I'm the guy who's like, oh, I'll watch the movie of the book versus read the book. But as somebody who's like so ingrained in the world of books, what are your thoughts on like how book adaptations have been handled over the course specifically of the last few decades where it really became popular? I mean, there's always been happening, right? But
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I would say in the last 20, 30 years, there's been like a huge uptick in especially YA novels becoming, films or, popular series in general, like a Harry Potter or whatever, like, or even some niche ones as well. What's your outlook on book to film adaptations?
So it seems like, as we all have probably acknowledged, most of the time they aren't as good as the book that they're based on because obviously there's all this paring down and stripping away of excess stuff that has to be done for the movie. Sometimes they get it right, and sometimes, like one of the best adaptations to me was The Lincoln Lawyer. That was really, really good because I had read the book, and the movie was just pretty much perfect as far as, hitting all those main spots. Um, Sometimes an on film adaptation can actually be better. Murderbot, which recently came out on Apple TV, and I listened to the novella that the first season is based on. The show is better than the
Hmm,
book because they go into more depth with the characters, and you just have more interesting, humorous interactions between all the characters and get a little bit more of their backstory and all of that. Dexter is another one where, well, at least for the first few seasons, the show was better than the books. Not that the books were bad, it's just like the shows just had something more to it. Game of Thrones. I feel like for the first few seasons that was better than the books because the books are just way too big to me. I feel like George R. R. Martin really just loves to hear himself write, and and it just got so big that the show condensed it down into what really mattered and made it more palatable for most people. But most of the time, oh, another good one, Silver Bullet. That is better than the short story it's based on. Most of the time, they're not done very well. I think if you have the original author involved in the screenplay writing, that can probably be a decent indication that it's going to be probably pretty solid. But yeah, I'm curious to see what's going to happen with Dungeon Crawler Carl whenever it comes to. I think it's where's it come to? I can't remember what platform it's supposed to be coming to, but I'm curious to see how they're going to handle that.
interesting, interesting. Yeah, no, I was curious on your thoughts on that because yeah, I always hear that, right? Like a lot of times, even for a movie that I like or a TV show that I like, I hear, oh, the book was better. And I'm actually curious on your thoughts too. I don't know if you're much of a Potterhead. I'm definitely a big Harry Potter fan from the
Yeah.
movies, from the video games, from the theme park. But mind you, I've never read a book. I've never read a
You haven't read the
single.
books.
Not once.
Oh.
Just a singular fan of the movies, but my whole life I've had people tell me, "Oh, the books are better," right? So I'm curious your thoughts, with something like that coming out, right? And there's also rumors of Twilight getting the same treatment of remakes, but now becoming TV shows where the whole season will be an individual book versus a movie. Do you think that will allow for the story to be told better, or do you think that something like Harry Potter was just like nailed in the movies? Like, what's your thought process on like certain shows that were or books that were made into movies now getting TV show adaptations?
Well, I think I actually like the idea. I'm a little annoyed by some of the casting that's been going on with the Harry Potter, especially Snape. That's
Yeah,
to me is
I think most
so
people, yeah,
obnoxiously ridiculous. Like, come on, please. And so then I lost all. I've gotten to this point, Anthony, where when they do stuff like that, like my tolerance level for it is so low. I'm usually like, I'm out. Nope, no, thank you. But I do like the idea of what they're doing because okay, so I started watching the Harry Potter movies before I started listening to the book. It was after the third movie that I went back and started reading the book, listening to the books. The ones done by Jim Dale. Fantastic. So good. Like the way he did the voices, the way the actors did their voices, like especially McGonagall and the early Dumbledore, matched almost exactly with the way Jim Dale did those characters. It's just phenomenal. But
interesting.
so then, before the fourth movie came out, I had then started reading the books, and I finished the fourth book the day the movie came out, like hours before I went to go see the movie. And I was so disappointed because I went in with all this expectation of what was going to be in there, and of course, a lot of stuff wasn't. And that was when I said to myself, if ever I read a book or watch whatever, vice versa. Let's say if I watch a movie, I'm going to wait a little bit before I read the book it's based on. Or if I read a book or listen to a book, I'm going to wait a bit before I watch the movie or show because I want my memory to be fuzzy. I want to
Gotcha.
forget a lot of details. But I like the idea of taking a big book because there's a lot of stuff and making a whole season out of it because then it feels like you can do the material much more justice than maybe was done in the films. The films are fantastic. I love the movies. I love them. And the
Gotcha.
books.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's awesome to hear. Yeah, I'm curious to see how it turns out for Harry Potter. I am. Again, I don't know all those added details. I think for me, those movies are so well done that it begs the
They
question
are.
if it's necessary. Like I would
That is a
argue,
good question. Yes.
right, right. I would argue that when I heard Twilight might get the same treatment, even though there's kind of like a cult silliness around Twilight that I almost kind of appreciate now, like in retrospect. I do feel like those are books just based on the movies, even though I don't think the movies are great, just based on the concepts, I could see it being done better in the hands of better creators. And maybe a TV show version of that with each book being a season could maybe be done a little bit better. But it also begs the question of whether or not we need that either, right? Like, and that kind of like leads me into my next question, that something I've loved having this chat with a lot of people on this series of it, which is the originality in film. You and I watch a lot of movies. We will
Mm-hmm.
see all the big popcorn flicks, but we also see a lot of the big small, or like the smaller niche films.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of discussion in the modern day, and I would say this has been a discussion for a long time of there not being originality in cinema anymore. And I always struggle with that notion. I've said it to many guests because I feel like there is still original films out there. They just don't get that mainstream push. People aren't going
Mm-mm.
to see them. They're just not getting that love. So I'm curious where you stand on that. Do you feel like there is a lack of originality in film, or do you think people just aren't seeking out that originality?
I do feel like it's both, actually, because it's easier to fall back on known IPs that are already, people like, so let's say sequels, reboots, and all that stuff, because they know this is a recognizable name or subject or whatever, and that's probably going to draw more people in, as opposed to, let's say, this little obscure film called The Outfit,
Right.
which is a fantastic movie.
Great movie.
And I'm going to be meeting the writer next month. I'm so
Oh,
excited.
nice. That's
Yes, so
awesome.
excited. Jonathan McLean. Looking forward to talking to him. He's going to be at our Lit RPG Con in Denver,
That's
because
awesome.
he's working on one of our books with us. But there's also plenty of other material out there. But no, they do not get the marketing push because it's not that big Marvel or DC or what the heck else.
Right.
So it's unfortunate because a lot of good stuff goes unnoticed, and then people mistakenly think there's not anything original, but there is a lot of. It's weird. Like I said, there's plenty of original stuff out there. But you kind of have to go digging for it, which
Right.
is annoying, because a lot of good stuff people have no idea. I don't tell you how many times I have watched a film on the big screen, and people will be like, "I'd never heard of this until you mentioned it." Well, that's a shame, because it was a fantastic movie. It's too bad more people didn't know about it. But there's also that extra expense. Those smaller movies, they're not going to want to. The studios aren't going to want to outlay, or let's say if they're indie, they're not going to want to outlay a big chunk of money on marketing, which is a lot of the expense involved.
Right.
So, it's
Yeah. It's a tough bag. Yeah, I love hearing your thoughts on that, because it is a real mixed bag, and it's interesting because so in recent months we've gotten things like the Snow White remake, we got the live action Lilo and Stitch remake,
mhm.
we got this weekend the new How to Train Your Dragon remake, which I honestly loved this new one. But I think part of that is because of the same director from the animated trilogy did it,
Mhm.
so it's like it felt true to the vision he had.
Yeah.
But I do think like it's interesting because I have a coworkers who will hear about the Lilo and Stitch remake who haven't seen it, but they've heard about the changes and they're like, "Oh, that's so annoying." And their discussion is around that film, right?
Yes.
And they're like, "There's no originality. There's no originality." But then something like Better Man comes out, right? That we both loved, and it bombs in theaters. And I've coworkers, Better Man, Better Man, Better Man, to the point where they like it's like a joke. And I have that Better Man shirt, so I'll come in.
I've got two. I've got
Do you?
two. The one
Nice.
you have, and then another one.
That's awesome. That's awesome. See, it's such a good movie, but like I'll come in with that shirt on or something, or I'll mention Better Man, and now they kind of roll their eyes with like a laugh, where they're like, "Oh, Better Man guy, here he comes." Or like anytime I bring up a movie, they'll be like, "Better Man," like so. It's become a joke, but only maybe three of them have actually seen the film, and all three of them who saw it based on my recommendations loved it.
Uh-huh.
And everybody else is like, "Oh, like there's no originalities," but they don't watch it. Then
They
the
don't
next time.
take the time. Yeah, exactly.
Right. And
They
then the next
just
time they come to me, because a lot of times, I'm sure you kind of have a similar thing with some of your peers where, like, because you talk about movies, somebody will see a movie and they'll be like, "Hey, I saw this movie," like they'll
mhm.
come to
Yeah.
tell you. And so I have coworkers all the time, like, "Hey, I saw this movie. Hey, I watched this movie for the first time. Hey, I watched this." And it's almost always franchise films, or it's always like a sequel. It's always like, a remake, or every here and there, it'll be like something something else, but it'll always be something very popular, right? Something like a Sinners. Like, oh, I
Sinners,
saw
I was getting
Sinners,
ready to say,
right?
yeah, yeah,
Which
yeah.
is fine. It's a great movie, but it's like, Sinners has the advantage of like a big name director,
Mm-hmm.
the a huge cast in the mix, and a big studio that's pushing it with a lot of marketing,
Right.
versus a lot of these other films that are, are still there. They're just not getting that big push. Like last night I saw the film The Life of Chuck with
Oh, yeah, I'm gonna see that tomorrow.
right, I saw your comment on that. And while I didn't love everything about the film, it was so unique. It was so interesting. It
Mm-hmm.
does something different. And it sadly feels like the kind of movie that a lot of people are gonna kind of maybe
Yeah,
see
it's
marketing for and just kind of breeze by. Even though Mike Flanagan is like a really well-loved director, but he's mainly well-loved for horror. So because he's not
same with Stephen King.
right, exactly. And so because this isn't like really in his normal wheelhouse, despite its incredible cast, it's the kind of movie that I don't think is going to do gangbusters, especially this weekend
Yeah.
against How to Train Your Dragon,
Yep.
or even, Materialist, which is, obviously the new film from Celine Song, which I also plan to hopefully see this weekend as well. So it's interesting. It's one of those things where it's just like I feel like the films are there, just people aren't giving these things attention. It
No,
breaks my
they're
heart.
not. Yeah, it's unfortunate. I think a lot of people, they're busy living their lives, and so they're not kind of like down in the nitty gritty of this subject matter as we are.
Right.
So they're not, if it's not handed to them, they're not necessarily going to seek it out. So
Right.
then they're just going to complain. Well, there's nothing original. Well, yes, there is.
Right.
Just
Right.
go look. So yeah,
And
yeah,
and
it's
there's
unfortunate.
even stuff that breaks into the mainstream from time to time that will be original, or at least had some sort of originality. I'm late, super late to the party, but my wife and I just finally watched the first two seasons of Squid Games, right? And
Uh,
like there's a good example of a show that, while it does, it takes from, in a lot of ways, for me it felt like a team version, or like a group version of like a tamer version of Saw, just like, people having to kind of fight for their life,
right.
minus the like, and it's different, of course, but like it has elements that are similar to other things, but it's different. It was unique, it was fresh, it's got its own identity. And
Hmm.
so that breaks into the mainstream, right? But then it's like people aren't willing to try and find something else that like has equally kind of interesting concepts, but they're there. I would say on a yearly basis, I see so many movies that are so good. Another good one from like last year, for instance, that I feel like cinephiles knew about, but not a whole lot, was called a movie called Hundreds of Beavers. I don't know if you
I
got
have
around to saying it.
not. I didn't
Yeah,
hear about that one.
highly recommended. It was one of my favorite movies of last year. It's essentially, the best way I can describe it, it is a live action Looney Tunes movie.
Oh
And
gosh.
it's about a dude. It's hardly got any dialogue, and when it does, it's all like subtitled, and the characters are kind of like rah, 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 rah. Like they're kind of like just speaking like random gibberish. And it was made by a really small team, and it's about a dude who's like lost in the mountains, and he's like fighting off a bunch of beavers, but
Oh
all the
gosh.
beavers are people in like mascot beaver costumes. And so like the humor of it is so silly,
Oh
and
no.
it's got to be one of the most original films I've seen in the last maybe decade. But a lot of people didn't see it, and maybe it's because they didn't get the marketing push, but it's also because people were caught up in the Deadpool and
They're caught
Wolverines
up
of the
in the
year,
big
or
stuff.
the
Yes.
Wickeds, which is fine. Those were some of my favorite films of the year too. But it's like that other stuff is there. I see Wilkie's popped in here to say Life of Chuck was a really good one. It's a shame that there's been like zero publicity around that with the names involved. Yeah, and I think even watching the trailer, I said it in my review that I just did, but the trailer only shows like Tom Hiddleston, Chiwetel Ejiofor, Karen Gillan, Mark Hamill, like some of those big names, Jacob Tremblay. But there's some other huge names.
Yeah,
Here's
heard.
what I'll say: if you're a fan of Mike Flanagan and like the onslaught of actors he's worked with over the
Hmm.
course of his career, specifically in his little Netflix run, starting with Haunting of Hill House to The Fall of the House of Usher, you're gonna be nice. You're gonna have some nice surprises with some of the big names that appear in the film over the course, even in small, brief roles. If you've seen the trailer, even like Matthew Lillard is in there. Like there's just so many big names in the film in like really small roles. And yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, I hope more people go to see it, because there's like a nice surprise to seeing these like all these big faces in this
Yeah.
this movie that's like super personal and small, and like it doesn't feel like it's trying to do anything like overly grand and spectacle based, but it's got a very personal story, you know, and it's got a really interesting story structure, telling itself backwards. Like it's an interesting film. Wookiees also said Hunters of Beavers is very funny, very original. Yeah, I highly agree.
Okay.
It's definitely a movie I highly recommend for anybody watching. If you've never seen it, highly recommend it. Worst reviews also popping here to say how's it going. Been
Hey.
listening to y'all at work. Hey man, thanks for
Uh,
chiming in. But yeah, you know, originality in film, it's something that I just hope more people give more films an opportunity. And I think equally, I hope that studios start to push these films a little bit more, because I do think we're getting to a point where certain franchises, certain live action remakes, they aren't doing the numbers they want, you
yeah,
know?
studios are losing a lot of money
Right,
on stuff, especially when they double down
right,
and
right,
continue to put out stuff that didn't go over very well. Like, let's say in season one or movie one, and they're, oh, here's another one
right.
that a lot of people don't care about. It would be cool to see them put that big power and push behind other lesser known content.
Are there any franchises or like studios that you specifically see and think like they're in trouble, or like that franchise is in trouble in the modern day versus maybe like when they were a powerhouse at a certain point?
Well, obviously, Star Wars.
Okay, fair enough.
I feel like Star Wars has been in a lot of trouble. There are some shining spots here and there, but I feel like they've gone way off the rails. I feel like Marvel is going a bit off the rails. I'm not inspired at all by what's going on with DC. I hate how they botched that whole thing with Snyder. Yes, I'm one of those
Yeah.
people that's very salty about them letting go of Henry Cavill, so I'm not going to watch the new James Gunn Superman. No, thank you.
Okay.
That's another thing I don't do, though. I do not hate watch. I will not, because some people create content based on hate watching
Right, right, of course.
because it creates a lot of interest in clicks. Unfortunately, I don't do that. If I go see a movie, it's because I genuinely want to give it a chance and want to enjoy it.
Right.
If I go in with a mindset that I automatically hate it, I just absolutely hate it, I'm not going to watch it. I just won't do it.
I mean, fair enough. I think that's probably for the best, right? Especially for integrity's sake, right? Like, I think
Yeah.
integrity is such a big part of what we do, and I think there's a lack of integrity. I think from a lot of people who do hate watch or do watch, sometimes just want to have that like controversial opinion, so they'll like kind of just go against the grain for the sake of going against the
It
grain,
does
you
feel
know?
like there's quite a few people that do that. I don't have the energy for that. I truly
Yeah,
want to love what I watch or at
right,
least enjoy it, not hate it. But if I hate it, I will tell you. I made
right.
a big mistake watching season 2 of Fubar. I don't know what the heck. I know what the heck. It was Arnold. Arnold. I love Arnold. So I got Arnold all around me here. I watched it because of Arnold. Big mistake. Will not watch season 3.
Right, but you know, it's one of those things sometimes where certain things will pull you in, right? And sometimes it's heartbreaking when something doesn't work. So, like you mentioned, Star Wars. For me, I love Star Wars, and I would even say that I've enjoyed more of what's come out in the modern day than not. But I also keep in mind that I'm watching everything, right? So, like, I think most people in the modern day are specifically watching the live action stuff, but where Star Wars I think has really shined in the last decade or so has been in its animation department, whether it be the
I liked Clone Wars.
yeah, the Clone Wars is incredible. Rebels is a beautiful follow up to the Clone Wars that connects the prequel trilogy to the sequel trilogy, and amidst that, the Bad Batch also came out, and these are shows that are widely loved by the people who watch them. But then the Acolyte came out, and
Oof,
while
yeah.
and it was definitely not on par with the same writing quality of these other Star Wars shows, despite being live action and set in a really cool time, having all these Jedi. And while I didn't hate it on the same level other people did, it was definitely a letdown by the time it got to the end of the season. Even though I was really into it at the first part of the show, I just think it kind of lost steam and then just fizzled out, and now it got canceled. So it's like, damn, that sucks. But I do think that when I look at the other stuff, then you have something like Andor that was like
Mm,
arguably some of the best Star Wars ever put to screen, you
yeah.
know? And so I think there's still some incredible Star Wars content being put out there. I just do think it's one of those things where like there's some fans that will not watch the animated stuff. For them, like the cartoon stuff is I don't want to watch it. And then there's some
Yeah.
people that are like, I only watch the live action. So it's tough to tell like what's going to do well. And then Marvel's in this weird place because even if they put out a good movie like the Thunderbolts, it's still bombed in theaters because I think people, you know, there's like a burnout. There's people feel behind. There's probably a lot of people who are like, I don't know who these characters are because I haven't watched all your
Yeah.
shows, you
Got to do
know?
homework before you
Right.
watch a show, a
Exactly.
movie, I mean, yeah.
And Ironheart comes out later this month, and I believe it's the last of like the shows that they had like announced right as Endgame was ending, that was already in
Okay.
production. So I know that they've announced that they're going to slow down drastically on the TV shows and the movie output on a yearly basis, but they of course were already in production of Ironheart like long before we even were introduced to the character in Wakanda Forever. So I'm curious to see where they go moving forward. I wonder if the Avengers films will kind of pull them back in and like bring that same level of like money to the franchise, but it's tough to say because
Yeah,
what they
maybe
did
a
with
f
Infinity War and Endgame was like special.
that was to me, that was peak
Right,
Marvel, peak
right,
MCU. I felt like that was the mountain, and I felt like everything after Endgame was just gonna be pretty much downhill with a few shining moments,
right,
like,
right.
you had some, but I don't get excited about Marvel films anymore like I used to. And there's some Marvel films and shows I just haven't even bothered to watch because either I don't care about the characters or maybe there's an actor in there that annoys me too much. I don't want to watch them.
Right.
Or I have heard about certain issues and I've read like plot synopsis and summaries or episode breakdowns and I'm like, nah, no. So I don't know. I don't know if they can right that ship, honestly,
Yeah.
to get it back to that excitement level that there was when Endgame came around.
I think they would just need to take a big break. For instance, I think while Star Wars has still been active with streaming, like I think like the fact that they've waited, it's been so many years since the last theatrical Star Wars film. I do think the next time Star Wars is on the big screen, it's gonna do well because I think there's gonna be that hype, like, oh, I'm watching Star Wars on the big screen. And we just saw that big boom with Revenge of the Sith. Now that's obviously a far more beloved film in the franchise,
Mhm.
but people were just excited to be watching Star Wars on the big screen again. And I almost think Disney botched that by only having it be in theaters for
Yeah, I
a
wanted
week,
to
you know?
go. I wanted to go again, but I was out of town
Yeah.
and I just didn't have the chance. But I would have if it had been in a little bit longer. I think they could have pulled in some more money.
Yeah, they left. I think, in my opinion, I think they left basically because I watch one of my favorite YouTubers is a guy named Dan Merle, and he
Oh yeah,
does
yeah, Dan. Uh-huh.
yeah, and he does his like box office breakdown every
Mm-hmm.
week, and he even mentioned it too. But it's like the millions of dollars they made on a 20-year-old film, like they left millions of dollars on the table, in my
Yes, they
opinion.
did.
And I would have gone and seen it again. I saw it twice when it hit theaters this last
Oh,
time.
lucky you.
Yeah, but only because I'm obsessed to a crazy level, and I was like, I got to see this movie. So I went by myself the first time, or I went with a friend the first time, and then my wife had never seen the film on the big screen because she didn't start watching Star Wars until she was dating me. So I was like,
Oh,
you have to see this. I know you love this one. That's like her favorite Star Wars film. So I was like, you got to see this one
it's
on the
great
big
on the
screen.
big screen.
Oh, it's so good. It was so good both times, and I wish that I could have seen it again because it's not. When is that going to happen again? You know what I'm saying? And
Right.
so yeah, it's an interesting thing for sure. And then I noticed Wilkie's popped in here as well to say, love the Clone Wars watching with my son when he was growing up. Wish we could have
Yeah,
had some
same.
films like that. Yeah, I would argue that like the animated world of Star Wars has created some incredible stories, and I would really implore people who haven't already to watch the other stuff that's animated as well because I think that's some of where the best Star Wars storytelling. We got the Darth Maul coming up too. That's going to be post Clone Wars, and like I think that there's some great storytelling still in that world. Now, another question, kind of like in this wheelhouse, that I'm curious your take on is we have an onslaught of film and television nowadays, not only in these franchises, but across everything. Like Fubar, you were mentioning, I've never seen it just because it's just one of the bajillions of shows
Right.
that's out on streaming, and there's so many streaming services now. Do you think that this is something that's just going to keep on going, or do you think there's going to be a point where the this kind of industry of like the multiple streaming services and the like weekly releases of like several shows and movies, is there a time where you think it's going to implode, or do you think we're just going to kind of continue to get this onslaught of content?
That's hard to say because there are so many streaming platforms and some of them fold. And some of them you wonder how in the heck are they going to be able to continue doing what they're doing. I honestly don't know what might end up happening. It does feel like they are throwing a crap ton of money at stuff that a lot of people just aren't seeing. And how can this continue? Because the money can't last forever. So are they just going to start to pull back and put less up there, or are they just going to completely fold and other platforms will come in and buy up that content? I have no idea. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's really interesting to see, and I think that some of the smartest studios have been the ones that don't have their own platform, right? Like a Sony, where a film can do okay in theaters, but they can still like, sell the
distribute
like
it. Yeah.
yeah, they could sell like the license for streaming for to a platform for a while, and then when that contract is up, they can, make some more money on the
Go
film
somewhere else.
somewhere
Yeah.
else. And so it is an interesting thing because there are some, yeah, like every week I hear about something new, and
It's like
it's just
uh, Amazon, Netflix, Apple
Peacock,
TV,
Paramount
Peacock,
Plus,
Paramount,
yeah,
MGM Plus.
HBO Max, like it's just
Yeah, it's almost more, and it creates this decision paralysis. What do I want to watch? I want to watch something new, but what? And then
right.
you spend more time trying to figure out what you want to watch than you actually would by just sitting down and watching it,
Well, and then it kind of
watching
it
something.
limits the viewership, right? Because like,
Yes.
I look at something like the Halo TV series, right? I'm a huge fan of the Halo video games. Now, I do think they kind of botched that show in some ways because they just automatically did not follow the narrative of the games, which is like
Mm.
literally there's what, 6 games now or 7 games if you count some of the spin-offs, more than that if you count the spin-offs, maybe like 9 or 10. But like there's a lot of story that's already been unfolded as far as just like the mainline games in the franchise, and they chose not to follow that
Why
narrative.
do they do this? I
And
don't
they
understand that.
right, and like so the show came out maybe a few years after the Mandalorian hit peak like hype, and in that show, of course, they established that like the Mandalorians don't take their helmet off, even though in the Clone Wars and everything else we've always seen Mandalorians take their helmets off, but they kind of established a new lore with that, like that era of the Mandalorians, they don't take their helmets off. And in Halo, Master Chief never takes his helmet off. Like it just never happens. But in the show, episode 1, he takes his helmet off. And so
Ugh.
like they try to humanize him. And I almost
Mm.
feel like maybe they didn't want to like be compared to the other sci-fi fantasy show that has a helmeted character. But I just feel like they immediately kind of like slapped some of their fan base in the face. Now, the reason I brought this up though was that the show ultimately didn't do the numbers. They did 2 seasons that I enjoyed for what they were because I just told my mind, don't look at this as an adaptation. Look at it as its own version of the
Something
story.
standalone. Yeah.
And there was still fun to be had. Like they played and they pulled the ingredients of the show, of this games, and kind of like did some cool things with it. It was entertaining to watch. But then it got canceled after 2 seasons. And so it sits there on Paramount Plus now with no continuation. But then because there's not like all these streaming services overseas, I saw that I want to say in South America, they Netflix got the license to put the Halo show on there, and then it hit like record numbers on Netflix. And so it's one of those things where it's like, I'm sure you could have still do good, but the reality is, I don't know a lot of people personally who have Paramount Plus over Netflix or Peacock over
Right.
Hulu or
Yeah.
Disney. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? It's like there's so much, and I think it really is kind of like shooting itself in the foot. And so yeah, it's interesting to hear your take on that too, because I do think it's got to give at some point. Like somebody's got to fall apart.
Yeah, because it's weird though, because people, back in the days where it was just like cable and you paid this big chunk of money for a bunch of channels you didn't want, and people complained about that,
Yeah.
right? And I get it. It's like, well, let's just pick the channels we want. So now we do have it very streamlined. Well, you want a Netflix? Do you want a Shutter? Do you want Amazon? Do you want
Right.
Apple? And then it's just like, then you're back to paying more than you were when you had things like cable. And so then that's a
Right.
problem too. It's like, well, I just wish there was one I could pick from.
Right, right.
Yeah,
Exactly. And Netflix used to be that one, right? Like they were like the legendary, like
they
the
were.
options were huge. And now it's just
Yep.
like there's so much competition if you want to watch certain things in certain places, certain franchises, this, that, and the third. So yeah, it's really interesting. It's really interesting to see how it's all panned out, and I'm curious to see where it goes. Quickly, I see we got some comments in here. Did you see that Mike
Hey,
pops in here saying two
Mike.
legends? Hope you're both well. He also said, who's an actor or actress who is completely one
One
note in
note.
their performances? For me, Dakota Johnson,
That's a
except 50
British
Shades of Grey. We
accent.
pick it up for close. Um,
Yeah, I have some that are like that. Yeah, Sandra
if,
Bullock.
okay, Sandra
She's
Bullock is one
pretty.
for
She's
you.
pretty one note for the most part. Yeah.
I have to think for a second. I don't know because I mean, there's a lot of actors that I guess you could say are like that, but I guess for me, I think like a really popular answer, and I'm curious to see if he surprises us with that wrestling movie that's coming out soon. Is The Rock? I like The Rock, but it's like it's just
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's
He's
so
another
one
one.
note, and
Definitely.
even somebody like Tom Cruise, who's super enjoyable, but it's just like he's got like a shtick to him. Like if you watch his,
Hmm.
was it like the Jack Ryan or Jack Reacher films he did versus
He
like
did
the
Jack
Mission
Reacher. Yeah.
Impossible versus Minority Report
Kind of
versus
played a
Top
different
Gun, like
character in Collateral.
Right. That's probably like one of
But
the most big, that and
love
Tropic
that
Thunder are
movie.
probably his most
Oh my
distinct.
gosh, Tropic Thunder. Lord have mercy. You'd never even know that was him. Yeah. So
Right,
yeah,
right.
sometimes they can kind of step outside of that box that most people, are familiar with. But yeah, Tom Cruise he's probably one of those people as well. Even in Collateral, he played very much a similar type of character ish
Right, right. You
to
just
what we're familiar with, but he
right,
was a villain, which
right.
made it interesting.
Like that's a standout for sure in terms of something different. And I think, ultimately his films are still entertaining, right?
Yep.
He knows his shtick, he's good at it, but I do think at times he can feel a little bit like, yeah, like he's kind of a similar character in all
Hmm.
these movies. Wilkie's popped in here to say, I still don't understand why music can figure out a better way. It seems like with something like Spotify to have it on so many different labels, I don't want streaming service, but movies and TV series can't. Yeah, it's tough because there's so.
Yeah.
I think with music, they want to kind of like have it all over the place, like everywhere that you can. And I think with movies, it's there really is just that red tape of like, well, we own this, so we're
Yeah,
gonna put it on our
licensing and
thing,
rights and
right?
all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Apple TV, just want to plug them because they put out some really good content, and
right,
it seems like most people have no idea.
right. And I would say myself as well. I don't have Apple TV, and there's so many shows that like I've heard good things about, but I don't have the platform.
Anthony, you're press, right? You're
Yeah,
considered press.
yeah,
Are you registered with a Film Critics Association?
yeah, yeah.
You can probably get access to their entire catalog
All right,
just as a member of the press.
I'm gonna have to do that for sure. Because
Yep.
the one thing I want to see for sure on there is Monarch, the Godzilla show. I've
Dude,
yet to
I
watch that
watched
one.
that.
Is it
I
good? Bad? I've
okay.
heard mixed things.
I really, really enjoyed the first few episodes of it. Then it kind of went off the rails for me, and
Okay.
I kind of so I'm not really planning to watch season 2. But I loved watching Kurt and Wyatt in a show together
Yeah,
with Wyatt
that's
playing a younger version of
right,
Kurt's
right.
character. That was cool.
That's the one thing that would intrigue me, and I'm also a huge fan of the Godzilla franchise.
You may really
Yeah,
love it. You may
yeah.
really, really love it then.
I want to check it out at some point for sure. Um, Mike popped in here also to say I'd argue with The Rock. His earlier stuff is a lot different from his filmography in the last 10 years. Yeah, to an extent. I would say the first time I ever saw The Rock in something, and I was like that was the moment that I like was actually sold on him as an actor, was when he did this Disney movie called The Game Plan, where he plays a football player and it's kind of
Oh
like
yeah,
meets his like
heard about that.
estranged daughter. It's like very cute, touching film, and it was the first time that I saw some nuance in him as a performer. But I just feel like since then, even though I enjoy him in a lot of movies, you think about something like Rampage or Jumanji or San Andreas or insert movie here. It's just like very samey performances,
Mm-hmm.
very samey
Yep.
humor levels. Even something like a movie that I'm definitely in the minority on from last year, called Red One, that he did with
Oh
Chris
yeah.
Evans. I like
Never
that
got around
movie.
to that one.
A lot of people didn't like it. I thought it was perfectly fine. I enjoyed it. I got to see it in 4DX the first time too, so maybe that kind of helped with the experience. But I saw it at home another time. I thought it was a perfectly enjoyable film. But even then, he's still doing the Rock
He's The Rock. Dwayne
thing,
Johnson playing himself,
right?
basically. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's
So
kind of
I'm
like Jason Statham.
right.
Jason Statham's kind of one
That's
note.
that's definitely a good example, right? Like I saw his movie earlier this year, A Working Man, and it was like at this
Oof.
point, I'm just so like how many times is it going to be the same plot, the same like that's another thing too. Not only does he play the same character, he takes on roles that are the same story that he's done 15, 20 other
Mm-hmm.
times. It's
Did you
like,
see
dude,
Wrath of Man?
Yeah, I did. That one was, I would think, one
That
of
was
his
a little
better
different.
ones.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that was definitely one of the better ones, I would say for sure. But
But
even
you're
that one,
right, what
it
you
gets
mentioned.
lost. It gets lost in the sauce a little bit.
Yeah, that was a Guy Ritchie film, but it was a remake of, I think, was it a remake of a French movie or it was based on a book or something.
Maybe
So it
I'm
wasn't
not
really
sure.
Guy Ritchie's own original concept, which is why it
Gotcha.
didn't feel necessarily like a Guy Ritchie film.
Guy Ritchie's in an interesting place in his career because there was a time where his films felt like Guy Ritchie films, and now I feel like
Not so
he's done.
much.
Yeah, like it's kind of tough to narrow down his style anymore. Like I think ever since he did that King Arthur film,
Oh,
it's just
yeah.
like his style has just seemed a little bit all over the place. Because while he's done something
He
like
did
The
Aladdin
Gentleman,
too, didn't
he
he?
did Aladdin. That's a great example as well. Like it just feels like it's hard to narrow down like what his style is anymore. You know, it's like, and I still enjoy him as a filmmaker, but it's a little more hit or miss. I can't lie.
Yeah, it's true. I did not like Operation Fortune. I thought
Oh,
that was terrible.
yeah, that was
It
in
was
my top 20
so
worst that year. Yeah,
so mid. And
yeah,
because it was mid, it was terrible to me because I've been entertained by a lot of his other films, and
right.
that's what I was expecting
And
because
you
he
have a
had
great
done
cast.
great cast, right? And like, what the heck happened? So that was a disappointment for sure.
Yeah,
But
couldn't agree
the
more.
I saw the Beekeeper, which was Jason Statham and the same director. Was it David Ayer?
Yeah, David Ayer. Yeah.
And then I heard about A Working Man, and I'm like, I don't know. You guys burned me with the Beekeeper. I don't know that I feel like this combo anymore. But then I heard it was written by Chuck Dixon, so I don't know. I still haven't watched it.
Yeah, so I enjoyed The Beekeeper, and I think the only reason I did was because it was tongue in cheek. Like it knew what it was. It almost felt like a silly version of John Wick,
Oh my
and
gosh.
and that at least sold me on, like, because I'm a sucker for something that like is aware of how silly it is. And I think with A Working Man, it took itself too seriously. Like it just it felt like a serious version of The Beekeeper, or like insert other movie he's done here. Like it
Mm,
just felt like so been there, done that, very one note, and it was just it never leaned into itself. You know, I feel like Jason Statham is at its best. Like that's why I think like the first Meg movie did really well, is because like he it's just like it's ridiculous. It's meant to be ridiculous. They're leaning into ridiculousness. I'm not saying that Jason Statham can't do a dramatic picture, but if you're gonna do this same thing of like, you know, I gotta go kill a bunch of people because they did this or that, it's like, I don't know. You got to do something that kind of like just elevates the material ever so slightly.
yeah, just a bit.
Right. I see Mike popped in here also to say, what one streaming service would you get rid of? Do you have one that comes to mind?
Well, I've gotten rid of multiple ones already. So, if I had to choose between, so I like my Amazon Prime, not just for the movies, but also the other benefits. So I don't
Right,
think I'd
right.
ever get rid of Amazon Prime. I like a lot of Netflix stuff. What else? I subscribe to Shudder, but I don't watch it nearly enough. But I love horror, so I don't know that I would ever want to get rid of Shudder. So honestly, I can't think of one that I have right now, Mike. If you had asked me this a couple years back, I would have been like, "Oh yeah, okay, Acorn TV," because I used to have Acorn TV, which is like a British, but I hardly ever watched it. So I got rid of it, even though I love British content. There's just too much. I
Right.
can't watch everything. So,
I would say of like the at least like the popular ones, probably Peacock for me. Like I
yeah,
just feel
see, I
like
don't have that. Yeah.
that's just one that just like anytime I go on it, it's for something it's like very specific, and then I just don't have that drive to go back to it. You know, it's kind of
Yeah.
become like the place to watch The Office now more than anything. But it's like, you know, I'm not really clamoring to rewatch that all the time. You know, like it's like
Right.
outside of that, there really isn't an abundance. Like the last time I used it was when the Chucky TV show was airing new episodes,
Oh
and
yeah, that's right.
other than
Forgot
that,
about that
I
show.
just don't use it, you know, and it's a weird app for me, I think overall. Mike also said, question for Perez: you have to choose one. What Star Wars TV show, movie, special would you delete from history? Um, of all time, probably the Christmas special,
Yeah, I knew
the
you were going to
original.
say that.
Yeah, like the holiday special for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
But then there's a charm to it too, right? Because it's like that was where they introduced Boba Fett for the first time in the little animated segment. So would I want to get rid of that? Maybe not. Um, Maybe because I hate a lack of continuity, and Star Wars has never canceled a single show and they've always brought it to a close. Maybe The Acolyte, and not because I think
Oh,
it's terrible, but because of the fact that it's canceled now, and it just feels like it's this thing that's just kind of like sitting in the ether that's just like not going to be played off of, you know, like at least with every other Star Wars show, they've said like Clone Wars was probably like one of the more long running ones, but it was like, hey, this is, you know, it was 5 seasons, and then they gave us the 6th season after the whole, you know, cancellation. But then like, here, we'll give you one final 7th season and wrap it all up. Rebels is 4 seasons, Bad Batch, I believe 3 seasons,
mm,
Resistance 2 seasons, like they, you know, Andor 2 seasons. They've always had like a they've always structured these things
completion.
to like have a completion, you know, like,
Hmm.
and so I struggle with the notion of having one Star Wars show that's just sitting out there in the ether that has no completion to it, especially with the way they ended the show and like teasing some really big characters like Darth Plagueis and Yoda, and then to just like completely leave that out there. It's just like, so that'll probably be my answer to that. Um, Wilkie's also popped in saying Guy has
I've
been
heard.
involved with the
Yeah,
Mobland
heard
series
that's
that I've
good.
enjoyed so far. Yeah, I've heard pretty good things about that one, honestly. I've got a question for you, Sin. It says, with our mutual dislike of Natalie Portman, if you were forced to watch one of her projects forever, what would it be? Laughing emojis, Star Wars prequel trilogy.
Well, it probably would be the Star Wars prequel. I actually did like Attack of the Clones, and is that what it was called?
Yeah,
Second
yeah,
Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith.
yeah.
Um, that's probably it. That'd probably be it. I really don't care for her at all. Like I avoid movies a lot of times if she's in it
Oh
because I don't.
man,
Oh,
that breaks.
I dislike her intensely, Anthony.
It's
I
it,
have very
well,
specific reasons for it.
well. You and Mike together can go to jail for as far as I'm concerned.
You know what? I've never really cared too much for her anyway. There's some people I get a vibe off, and I can't necessarily put a finger on why in the moment. It's just like I don't like you for some reason. You just like there's something about you that's not sitting well with me, and I don't think I fully figured it out until after Natalie had done the second Thor movie.
Okay.
And she was talking about that scene where her character slaps Thor. I don't know if you've heard this story.
I feel like I did, but I can't remember it.
Okay, well, this is what cemented my dislike for Natalie Portman.
Okay.
Also, the whole thing about her claiming all this credit for the ballerina stuff in Black Swan when it was really a double that did a lot of that really intricate stuff, but they pumped her up like I didn't like that, and she basically bought her way to the Oscar with that. I didn't like that. But the thing with Thor was her character slapped him
Right.
because he hadn't made contact with her. I mean, he'd been busy saving the world and destroying the bridge, to get back to her, so, but, she slaps him because you didn't call, basically. But that was her character, right? So it's like, but this is what did it. She said when she was filming that scene, she can't do a fake slap. So she was literally actually slapping him in the face for real. And so I was like, well, that's weird and I don't buy that nonsense. But then this is what she said. She liked doing that because it felt like it felt like a slap for all womankind. I was like, you turd. Yeah, I just like then that told me I cannot stand it when people do this sort of like men versus women and women are superior and men are just pieces of trash. And that was what I took from that comment. And I was like, that is such nonsense. I definitely don't like you. We'll try to avoid you forever. So that was what pushed me over the edge. But it didn't take much, to be honest.
All right, fair enough, fair enough. I love Natalie Portman.
A lot of people like her.
Yeah, I mean, as a kid, when I saw her in The Phantom Menace for the first time, like I fell in love with her. Like ever since then, it's like she was probably like my first like true like celebrity crush.
Your true crush, yeah.
Yeah, even to this day, like my wife and I joke like she's like my one hall pass that'll never happen. But I mean, through the Star Wars prequel trilogy for sure. But then even I was still young, so when I first saw her in I was like 6 years old when The Phantom Menace came out. So then through that I ended up learning about Leon the Professional. So then I see her, I see her closer to my age there, and I was like even more in love. And then as I got older, V for Vendetta or Black Swan and so many other movies she's done. Like I've just always enjoyed her. Like any other actress or actor, there's plenty of movies she's done that I thought were not good or she wasn't good in it. But I do love her. I just do. It was very awkward a few years ago. Was it 2 years ago when she was in that movie with Julianne Moore?
Oh, that was
December.
I did watch that movie only because I got a screener for it.
Right.
And I was intrigued because I remember the story that it was inspired by.
Right.
Oh, it was so stomach churning. It
was an uncomfortable watch. Mainly for me, the scene that was the most uncomfortable was I watched it with my wife, and then there's that scene where she's like touching herself, and and the camera's right on her face and she's moaning and stuff like that. That was a weird scene for me because I was both enjoying it, creeped out by it, but then my wife is sitting right next to me. So I'm like, if I was watching this alone, maybe a little bit more enjoyment. Having my wife sit there next to me, knowing that this is like my celebrity crush was a strange choice. We've laughed about that since, but yeah.
Yeah, that was some movie, I'll tell you. Ooh, it was just all kinds of grossness going on with that.
Not one I could say that's on my rewatch of Natalie Portman's. Yeah.
No, and they sent me like a T-shirt or something. You know how they send you? Oh, you got it too. Huh?
I got it too. Yeah. And it
I was
was
gonna say, you want mine?
and it was like another thing too. It was like a white shirt too with like pink text. I was like, okay,
Like red or pink. Yeah, it was
yeah,
lettering outlined in red
yeah.
or pink or
I'm
something.
like, I'm not wearing this. I don't really wear white t-shirts. This is the lightest shirt I'll wear, and I usually wear this at home. Like I'll never really wear this like out, you know. Um, the movie man popped in and say, I would love to hear Sin's thoughts on Ana de Armas, the Grace Robber rumored on becoming the new Wonder Woman. I'm sure she's pleased as punch.
I hadn't heard about Anna. I had heard about
I've
what's
heard
that
about
chick's
Adria
name?
Arjona.
Adria Arjona and uh I can't remember how to pronounce her first name, but the chick who played in oh my gosh, she played in what was that movie? That show about the Chinese, the aliens and the you know who she is. She's played in a lot of Robert Rodriguez stuff. She played in From Dusk Till Dawn, the TV adaptation. She played the Salma Hayek character. She played
I'm
in
struggling to put a face to the
Godzilla
name.
versus Kong. She was like the lady at the end. Oh gosh. That's bugging me. Like Aize or something is her name. EI
Oh, I know what you're
some
talking about. She was just in that movie Ash with
Ash, yes,
right,
her.
okay, gotcha. Yeah,
I had
yeah.
heard her and the other girl. I hadn't
Yeah.
heard about Ana de Armas. My personal preference would be the chick whose name I can't say.
Gotcha. I've also heard the rumor circling around Michelle Michelle not Michelle Melissa Barrera from the Scream movies. I've also heard her kind of tossed
Okay,
into
I
that conversation.
had not heard that. So nothing's been cast yet. But
Nothing's been
this
cast, yeah.
but this will be within the James Gunn universe, right?
Right, right.
Yeah, I don't know that I'll even watch it because I'm still angry about Gal Gadot being let go of.
Yeah, I mean, I
Which
definitely agree with you there. Right? I didn't touch on that earlier, but yeah, I think it's a shame because I think they could have course corrected, and like just
yes,
kind of like made it all. I do think though that it was messy what they did. Like I think there was
it
great
was.
installments, but I think they rushed all of it to kind of catch up to Marvel, and I
You
think they
know
should have
what?
kind of taken their time.
What was kind of frustrating too was the fact was how he kept some things intact, specifically content involving his wife,
Right,
the peacemaker stuff, and it's like,
right, right.
yeah, okay, James, we see what you're doing there. That was kind of annoying. So
So
I
some
just
of it does make it confusing moving forward, right? Because it's like I mean, even like Blue Beetle when that came out, they were like, "Oh, this isn't the first true installment into the new DCU, but that is going to be part of the
because he's
DCU."
gonna
And then
still be part of it. Yeah, I heard he's
right,
coming
but
back
then
in some manner.
Peacemaker is still in the world, which means that the iterations we saw in that Suicide Squad movie that are still part of the old lineup
Right,
are
it's
there.
weird.
But
Yeah,
then at the end of the first season of Peacemaker, you have like even though you can't see them, you have
you
the
know who they
lineup of
are
right.
exactly.
So
Yeah.
it's like it is creating already a now mind you could lean into the multiverse of it, but that is a little bit of an eye rolly kind of like explanation to
Mm-hmm.
how it all kind of pans out. But I'm curious to see how it pans out. I've been a longtime fan of the DC universe, and I just want to see a cohesive, well put together universe that like Marvel, where like despite any issues, at least we know who the players are. We know who's in the world. There's no discrepancy on like, oh, this character's over here and this character's over there, and like this one's like, at least it's kind of spelled out for us with Marvel.
Well,
Like,
they had started with a good base. They had
right,
a good foundation, and they took their time.
right,
They're getting a little messy with things now, but they
right.
took their time and built this up. DC was like, "Oh my gosh, we got to catch up! Boom, let's just jump in and do this thing."
Right, right. They got to the Justice League way too fast. I think had they taken their time, done their Batman, done their Superman, done this, that, and the third, um, yeah, I think they would have done a lot better. Quickly here, I see Mike said make Gemma Chan Wonder Woman. That would be a great fit. I don't know that I would see her as Wonder
I
Woman
can't
person.
place her face.
She was the main chick in the Eternals, the Asian lady.
I never saw that.
Yeah,
That's another one of those movies I was like, nah, not interested. Let me
fair
see.
enough, fair
Oh,
enough.
I see. No, no.
Yeah, I
Mm-mm,
wouldn't see her as Wonder Woman personally. I don't think she
mm-mm.
fits the character, but I could see her as somebody else. I think she's a fantastic actress. But yeah, as we come to the end of this, I just want to say a big thanks to you for stopping by and having a chat with me. I don't want to take too much more of your time, but I really appreciate it. This chat has been so much fun to have. It's been great to hear your thoughts on book adaptations to movies, film in general, the current state of originality in films, and all these different fun things. And so I just want to take a moment to let you plug anything you got on your channel, anything you're working on, anything you got coming out soon that people can check
Um,
out.
yeah. Well, thanks again for having me. This was a lot of fun. Uh, Coming up on my channel, I don't have anything in the pipeline. I do have plans. I'm gonna go see what's that movie?
Life of Chuck.
Yeah, Life of Chuck. I was like the unbearable weight of Chuck. I was like, that's not right. It's too many titles running around in my brain. I'm gonna go see that tomorrow. Hopefully, get a review up for that. But today I released a review for The Phoenician Scheme. That came out right as we were going
Right, right.
live. And yesterday it was Fubar. I think I put up a review every day this week. So that's my most recent content. And hopefully, review for Life of Chuck coming up. I'm not sure right now about anything else. So I kind of just play it week by week, Anthony, because it's I tried doing this like long-term planning. It doesn't work for me.
It's hard to do, right? And
Yeah.
I think, well, firstly, thank you so much for taking the time. Just realized I missed a question that kind of touches on what you were just saying. I just want
Okay.
to lastly touch on it. D Movie Man says, considering the sodium that comes forth from Perez when he misses a screening, which is true, I'll ask how you all decide, pick, and choose between what screeners and screenings to watch/attend or not. I know for me, at least, I always grab a ticket for something that I don't get a screening for or a screener. There's nothing earlier for the weekend, usually like a Thursday or Friday, depending on what my work
Mhm.
schedule is. But I will do everything I can to make it to every screening I'm invited to, which is usually like flipping my schedule around, swapping shifts with coworkers and different things like that. To try and make it to those screenings. So if I can, I will. But like in the case of this week, I actually had my screening at the exact same time at the exact same theater for How to Train Your Dragon or for Materialist. So I
Oh,
chose How to Train Your Dragon, but that was a bummer, right? Like I had to miss one. And then a
yeah,
few
to
weeks
pick,
ago,
yeah.
I missed my early screening for a Mission Impossible because I had to work. Like I just couldn't get the shift swap. So that's usually, to answer your question, D, that's usually where I will kind of falter. It's like if I can't get the shift covered or if there's two screenings the same night, then I'll kind of just like pick one that immediately has preference to
Appeals to
me.
you the
What about
most.
you, Sin?
For me, it is typically how it appeals to me. If I'm actually interested and if I get an invite, I will make the effort to watch it. If I'm not super interested, I usually don't. So
Fair enough. Hey,
yeah, because I get a lot of digital screeners that I pass on. I'm like, eh.
that's true too. I don't always count the digital screeners because there are plenty of them. If I have like a slow week, maybe a week that there isn't a screening for a movie, that not every studio puts out those early screenings. Sometimes they just, release them normally. Every here and there, that's when you'll see me cover something from streaming or something that I was sent from like some smaller niche thing. Because I do think there's kind of like an advantage to throwing on a review for something that maybe isn't going to get immediate clicks, but like you'll check back on it months later and it garnered hundreds or
Yeah,
thousands of
yeah,
views
yeah.
because people started to kind of learn about it as it was hitting streaming. Um, but yeah, I think it's just a matter of time too. Like if I get a screening for
Time
something
and
and it's like,
interest. Yeah.
yeah, like I'll get screenings for movies sometimes or screeners for like movies that like I'm like, oh, this sounds cool, but then I'll look at it and it's like the release date's like in 2 days and I just don't have time. And it's like,
Yeah. Don't you hate when that happens? It's like you're not even hardly giving me enough time to sit down and turn around a review. And then the thing with Ballerina was weird. Do you remember that? Do you remember the
yeah,
weird, like they were saying, um, positive social media commentary, you can do that on May 22nd, but please withhold your full reviews and basically negative critiques until like a
like
day
the day
before the movie
before.
comes
Yeah.
out. It's like, why'd you do that for us?
And I feel like my review ended up being hurt by that because
Yeah, you put
I'm
it up right. You didn't realize there was
well,
that
my
weird
the
embargo.
email, yeah, the email that I received, and I went back and checked and everything for the invite did not include an embargo. Now, 9 times out of 10, I'm sure with you as well, the embargo is right there on the
Right there on the
email.
email. In my
Um,
screening, it had it up on the screen.
right, and so 9 times out of 10, when I go to these screenings, they have the big poster on the screen before the movie
Yep.
starts, and these are at the screenings that don't have any trailers. It's just like sitting up
Yep.
there, and then the movie will start up,
Hmm.
and it usually has the embargo on there. The screening I attended never put the poster up before the movie started. It was just a blank screen until it went up. So I was at the disadvantage.
Oh.
And so usually, whenever that's the case, and there's no embargo on the email or on the screen, I always just, more often than not, you're safe to just upload your review.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't until I uploaded my review and I look around and I'm like, I know other people who saw the film but didn't upload the reviews. That's when I reached out to a couple of people and said, hey, do you know anything about an embargo? And then they told me, and I was like, oh crap. So I made the video private again, but then that just kind of like hurt the video a little bit because once it goes live again, it doesn't resend out that notification to my
Right.
viewers, you know? So the video did okay, I guess, for a channel of my size, but I knew I probably would have done better had it just had that time to breathe
Yeah, that's
properly.
frustrating.
But yeah, embargo stuff can be weird too, you know, it's like how they choose to approach all that. But yeah, I hope that answers your question, D. But Sin, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. I look forward to having you on the channel again in the future.
Sure.
To everybody watching, this will be live on Spotify as well. So if you're listening to this on Spotify, thanks for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Very happy to have Sin on. You guys can find the link to Sin's channel down below in the description box. So go give him some love. Let her know I sent you. Check out all that great content she was already setting up, and look forward to a lot more early reviews over on her channel as well. A great place to keep up with a lot of the new movies that are coming out, as well as some fantastic television like Fubar.
Don't remind me of that. Murderbot, not Fubar.
There
Don't
you
watch
go.
Fubar. It's terrible.
But yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I look forward to having you
Thank
on in
you
the
again.
future. To anybody watching, thank you so much. We really appreciate you, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.
Bye.